Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. Today, I am going to share my review of the Old Margreve for Tales of the Valiant from Kobold Press. This 252-page hardcover is available now, carries an MSRP of $49.99, or you can grab just the PDF alone over at DriveThruRPG for $34.99. Having said all that, let's swing on over to the other camera, because here I've got the Old Margreve. A few things to mention before we get stuck in. First of all, my friends over at Kobold Press were kind enough to provide me with this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. It's important you know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of the book, but I do want to give you a really good feel for what you're going to find inside. And then lastly, there are 11 adventures contained within. So if you're a player and your game master has picked up the Old Margreve, maybe they just haven't started running the adventures yet, or maybe they're talking about picking this up. When we get to the adventure portion, I definitely recommend tune out. There are going to be some minor spoilers that I share. Then, of course, as we're flipping on through the book, you are going to see some things that are going to ruin the surprises of the adventures. So you have been warned. Of course, if your game master is kicking around picking this up, let them know about this video. That way they can approach the Old Margreve and make a far more informed buying decision. All right, first thing we're going to do is take a look at the credits page. A lot of folks work very hard to bring this to life. So let's give credit where credit is due. If you are not familiar with the Old Margreve, it is this massive forest area in the Midgard setting, which is the home fantasy setting for Tales of the Valiant, as well as many 5e D&D supplements that Kobold Press has released over the years. And it is also one of my absolute favorite high fantasy settings available in the role-playing game community at this moment. I reviewed the World Book a few years ago. Check out my review if you haven't seen it. Granted, I will say the video quality is not great, but what I said still goes. I absolutely love Midgard. I think it is a fantastic fantasy setting. It's got a little bit of a fairy tale vibe going on. It's also got some dark horror going on. There's a lot to love about the setting. So we will start off with a look at some places of interest in the Old Margreve. And one thing I do want to point out as a game master, running adventures that take place in the Old Margreve, such as the 11 that are contained in this book, always keep in mind, the forest is a sentient entity. It is not just a collection of trees and plants and animals and other beasties. It is a sentient entity that does not necessarily welcome outsiders. It's important for you to keep that in mind, and it will actually provide you with an additional cool layer to your adventures if you utilize that. Because the Old Margreve is a primordial forest for the most part, and it is a very difficult place to survive. Absolutely love the Old Margreve. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. There are allies the player characters will meet, and there are places for them to take respite, such as the Bluebell Coaching Inn, which is actually very interesting because it's not simply a tavern. It's not simply an inn. There's a lot more to it than that. And it actually belongs to the forest, which is not something the player characters would know. But I thought that's a cool little aspect to it also. So we will find these various places of interest. We'll get descriptions. We will get adventure hooks. We'll get some information about running adventures in the Old Margreve as well. So lots of cool information, although I would say most of this is going to be game master facing. I don't think it would be critical if your player characters got hold of this, but there are some things in here that I would utilize as surprises, that's for sure. Then we're going to get into our player character options. We do have 4 new lineages, races, species, and we've got the Alciad, and they are sort of like centaurs, but instead of the lower body of a horse, it's the lower body of a deer. We've got the bear folk. I love the bear folk in Midgard. It is so cool that now players can take on the role of bear folk. We also have the Irina, which are these hedgehog creatures, which probably are my least favorite of the 4. Although the Old Margreve is a place where you do have uplifted creatures. You have awakened creatures. So these hedgehog folk are kind of in that category there. Then we have the Pineys, who are actually living wood. So they're pretty cool there as well. So really interesting new lineages for you to choose from. We've got new heritages, which all tie into the forest in some way. You do not necessarily have to belong to the new lineages to utilize the new heritages, although there is one that's actually tied into the bear folk. You must be bear folk to take that on. Then we'll get subclasses, and most of the main classes from Tales of the Valiant will get new subclasses. We have some that get 3. So we have the Druid, the Ranger, and the Warlock all get 3 subclasses, of course, along with the other subclasses that are available. But most of these also have 2. So I thought that was pretty cool. I want to say, if I remember correctly, the Sorcerer only has 1, but I think the Wizard and the Sorcerer only have 1 subclass, if I remember correctly. We'll get a bunch of new spells, also having to do with the forest. And then we will get a bunch of cool new magic items. And that is how we will wrap up the first 90 or so pages of the book. Like I said, this is player and game master facing, although the information about the forest itself, I feel, is probably more just for the game master's eyes alone. Now we will move into the adventures, which of course is where I would recommend the players tune out, because I am going to have some minor spoilers. And of course, you're going to see some things too. Now, before I get into the discussion of the adventures, I do want to mention, as far as the production quality, really, really nicely done. I got to say, the last few Kobold Press books I've had an opportunity to review, the paper feels heavier. This is a much heavier paperweight, and I love that, especially since this is an adventure book for the most part. You're going to be flipping back and forth in this as a game master and referring to this quite a bit at your game table. So it's important that this is going to hold up for repeated use. I also get a bookmark. And then the artwork throughout, I really like the artwork. Now, I'm a fan of Kobold Press artwork. There are people kind of bust my chops about it, especially because I'm not really a fan of the character style of Pathfinder First Edition. So I've had people ask me, how in the world can I like the Kobold Press artwork, but I dislike the First Edition Pathfinder artwork? And the answer to that is, well, number one, I don't necessarily dislike the artwork from First Edition Pathfinder. It's just not necessarily my bag. And the artwork for Kobold Press is quite different. The First Edition Pathfinder artwork has a lot of very sharp angles, which gives the characters, the monsters and such, kind of a cartoonish look, where that's not present in the artwork here for Kobold Press. And like I said, I just like their artwork. Yeah, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? So let's talk about the adventures, because there are 11 of them in here. 10 of them, to my knowledge, previously appeared in Tales of the Old Margreve, which came out a few years ago. It was statted for 5e. Of course, the Old Margreve is statted for Tales of the Valiant, which also means with very little work, you can convert it over to Dungeons and Dragons, obviously enough. But the 10 adventures that previously appeared are now statted for Tales of the Valiant, and there is a new adventure, once again, to my knowledge, that has been added to this. Now, as far as I know, with Tales of the Old Margreve, the adventures didn't tie together. They were just presented in level order. And the reality is you could create a campaign out of that. It's easy enough. Now, with the Old Margreve, there is an overarching campaign, but I got to say, it's probably the weakest part of the book. Because to me, as a player, if you were to introduce this campaign premise at the beginning of the 11 adventures, I would feel like, what are these, fetch quests? Because at its heart, each adventure has a magic item that the player characters are looking to retrieve for this good fae, who is trying to keep these items out of the hands of the shadow fae who want to use them for their own nefarious purposes. And of course, the good fae wants to use them for good purposes. Like I said, pretty weak. What I would no doubt look to do is maybe introduce that after the 4th adventure. And the reason why would be, I would want my player characters to already have acquired some of these magic items, maybe be very fond of these magic items, and now they've got a dilemma. Are they going to give these magic items up to this good fae? Or are they going to hang on to them and possibly risk the shadow fae trying to get their hands on them? Or maybe the good fae doing what she can to get her hands on them? And depending on the kind of player characters you've got, maybe there's a little negotiating. And what do we get if we give these up? So that's why I'm saying I wouldn't introduce it right away. And I would try to make it more than just, oh, here's another adventure. Here's a magic item you're looking to retrieve. Now, if you do not utilize that campaign, then the gathering the magic items kind of goes out the window, which is okay. As far as the adventures themselves, though, they're really good. I like these adventures quite a bit. And I know for some strange reason, people out there just kind of clump Kobold Press together with Wizards of the Coast. I guess it's because of how much 5e content Kobold Press has made over the years, and Tales of the Valiant is compatible with 5e and 5.5. But the adventure design philosophy for Kobold Press is quite different than Wizards of the Coast, because you have quite a few people involved with Kobold Press who utilize an old school mentality to their adventures. So the adventures aren't just simply, here's a new location. Well, we got to go kill that. Hey, we're in a new location. What's that? Got to kill it. Which we see with tons of fantasy role-playing adventures. That is not the case here. Now, yes, of course, there's plenty of action. There's plenty of combat. But there are multiple opportunities throughout these adventures for the player characters to resolve things without resorting to conflict. Maybe they outsmart their opponents. Maybe they outtalk their opponents and get their opponents on their side, looking at things the player character's way. So a lot of opportunities for good role playing in these adventures as well. So we're going to wrap up. We've got an appendix with all of the new creatures. We do have the new lineages presented as bestiary entries. So we do have that. So if you want to use the bear folk or the pinies, they are in here as NPC creatures. We'll mention not every entry gets artwork, which is okay. I honestly would have liked to have seen artwork for everything, but that is not the case there. Then we're going to have some encounter tables based upon our challenge ratings. One last thing I do want to mention about the adventures, and that is with important NPCs. Let's see if I can find one quickly. Probably not. With important NPCs, we'll actually have a side box. It's not a stat block. It is a side box, and it will describe that NPC and their motivations and what are their traits and what are their flaws, what are they looking to achieve, and what may come up in conversation if the player characters engage with that NPC. Love that information. Makes it much, much easier to utilize those NPCs. I do wish there were more of those blocks. There are some, not a ton, and there are some NPCs that don't receive them that I think could have used them. But all in all, I love the fact that we've got those little side boxes. All right, so that is a peek inside the Old Margreve for Tales of the Valiant from Kobold Press. Let's swing on over to the other camera so I can share some final thoughts as well as my review score. I think by now it's probably pretty obvious that I really like the Old Margreve. Then again, I've already told you I'm a huge fan of the Midgard setting, and the Old Margreve plays an important role in that setting. The 11 adventures, all in all, really nicely done. Some of them have a bit of a fairy tale vibe, which I really, really like. I've already mentioned the overarching campaign idea, in my opinion, is pretty weak, especially if you introduce it right at the beginning of those 11 adventures, because then the players are going to feel like, oh, geez, we're just going off on fetch quests, which should not be the case. Tweak it a little bit. Maybe go with the idea I floated out there about introducing that later on in the sequence of adventures. That way, your players have to decide what do they want to do with those magic items. I think you might have a lot of fun with that. As far as the player-facing content, a lot of cool options here. We've got the new lineages, got the new heritages, we've got the new subclasses. So there is something for everyone. Got a lot of cool new spells that focus on the forest. And then we've got some really nice new magic items also. The information about the Old Margreve is super interesting. Once again, as a game master, be sure to remember the forest is a sentient entity, and it will have feelings about the player characters. It might welcome them. It might despise them. It might be leery of them. Use that. And there are actually some tables in the book that kind of provide you with some ideas as far as if the forest is hostile or friendly or welcoming. So definitely utilize that too. All in all, this is an excellent book. Production quality, top notch, as I had mentioned as well. Now, the big question that a lot of people are going to have is, do I pick up the Old Margreve if I've already got Tales of the Old Margreve? That is a tricky question. So if you do not run Tales of the Valiant and you run 5e or some 5e adjacent role-playing game, I would say if you've got Tales of the Old Margreve, you should be fine. I probably don't necessarily feel that it's imperative that you grab a copy of the Old Margreve. Now, if you are running Tales of the Valiant and you also have Tales of the Old Margreve, a little trickier because the adventures are statted for Tales of the Valiant. We do have the new lineages, the subclasses, and all of that. So this might be more of a must-buy. Now, of course, if you're running Tales of the Valiant and you do not have Tales of the Old Margreve, hell yeah, you want to pick this up, because on a scale of 0 to 10, I give the Old Margreve a 9 out of 10. Really like it. And the adventures are very cool. Loads and loads of excellent new player options too. All right. So that is it for this time out. If you like the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell. It'll not only let you know when I share videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings right here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Central. If you'd like to support the Gaming Gang, we do have a Patreon page. That link is in the show notes. And of course, we also have a Discord server. So if you'd like to join the gang, got a link for that too. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thank you very much for watching. And until I see you next time, I certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.